Hi everyone, you're welcome to another video tutorial on Figma. In this video, I will take you from having zero knowledge of auto layout to creating advanced and nested auto layout that can respond to any screen size, just like the one you see on my screen here. So without wasting any more time, let's dive right into what we are going to be doing for today. So in this video, we're going to start from the very basic foundations of auto layout. The difference between a frame and a rectangle. So you need to understand this so that it will be very easy for you to create auto layout. So what is the difference between a frame and a rectangle? So a frame is basically a box. It's simply a box that can hold different elements. So it's good for creating auto layouts, and it's also used to create components. If you want to also create your page, you can also see that most of all these pages here, most of all these sizes are all frames, because you want to use them to hold other elements and other objects. So now a rectangle is just basically a plain shape. It's basically like a rock. It's plain. You can't put anything inside. It's just a standalone object. It's just another shape. So, and another cool thing about a rectangle is that you can use it to mask objects. So it's always good to use a rectangle to mask objects. And once you click on enter on your keyboard, you can easily customize a rectangle, which is not possible with a frame. So I see a lot of beginner designers try to use rectangles to create auto layout and all that, which is not a very good practice because you might end up getting frustrated trying to do that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to add auto layout to your project. So we are going to use a simple illustration. Let's try to create a button. So let's impute this is a button. So now to add auto layout to this text now, just hold Shift A on your keyboard and see auto layout added successfully. So we'll just have to change the color quickly. So now you can see that we have successfully created our auto layout. So that's just how simple it is to add auto layout. Or another way to do this is that let's remove the auto layout. So you can remove auto layout here too. So another way to add auto layout is but the way I showed you earlier now if you actually put a text first, you won't see the auto layout feature here. That's why I use Shift A. But let's say you created a container first before, and there's already a text inside. I want to add auto layout to it. In this case, you can see the auto layout stuff here because you've already created a frame rather. So when you have a frame, immediately you draw a frame, it is possible to change that to an auto layout. But if you are creating a text or any other shape, you have to use Shift A manually to actually add auto layout to that. So that's just what I wanted to clear. So another way to add auto layout to this is just to come here and add auto layout. So that's that about adding auto layout. So the next thing we are going to talk about is what is fixed, hug, and fill content. So I see a lot of people getting confused about this, what this is, but let's clear the air quickly. So in the case of fixed content or fixed width and all that, the parent element or the parent container, when I'm talking about the parent container, I'm talking about this frame that is holding this object. This text inside is just like the child of this parent container, which is a frame. So now the frame, it always maintains a specific width. So regardless of the child content. So this is set to width. When I set this to width, let me to fixed rather. So this is already on fixed. So you see, it's a fixed width. So once I set this fixed width now, regardless of the child element, regardless of what I'm typing, it doesn't matter. The shape remains fixed. So it remains fixed. So regardless of the content inside, if you like, the content should be bigger than, once it's fixed, it doesn't move. So the next one we're going to talk about is hug. So once you set a frame that's the parent frame to hug, let's change it. Okay, it's already on hug. So once you change the parent frame to hug, now the parent container then resizes in respect to the child element, which is now the text. So if you look at this, so the hug, basically when you add hug to the parent's container, it adjusts the size based on the content, which is the child element, based on the child element. Let me change this to based on its child element. So anytime I talk about child or parents, just know that child is basically the element or the component that is inside a frame. You understand? Then parent is like the frame holding that particular element. So the parent's frame adjusts its size based on the child element. You get? So now let's try that out. So you see the parent frame, it adjusts as the child element increases. So if I go to the next line, same thing. It keeps adjusting. But I have to click on enter to go to the next line. So that's for the hug. I hope you understand that. So the next thing is talking about the feel. So one thing about the feel is that in the case of the feel, it's a bit kind of like tricky, which you need to listen very well. So each time you want to add feel to an element, you can't add feel to the parent frame. You get? You can only apply the fixed. Let's say, because you want the inside object. When you apply fill, you always want the object inside to move with the container. So adjusting the parent container to like a fixed width is what is the best, because you can't account for all these changes. So let's experiment that. You see, once I'm typing, once it gets to the end, it goes to the next line. Once it gets to the end, it goes to the next line. And another thing is that let's just type some few random text. So now let me go back and recreate this from scratch, because I didn't add the few. I wanted to just give you the illustration. Now to create this, what you just do is just create a frame. It doesn't matter the size of the frame. It depends on your project though. So once I just applied a color to the frame, so the next thing is that I will just add an element to it. Let's just add a text. This is a text. So now the next thing is now to add auto layout to the frame, which is the parent container. So we've made it an auto layout. So now we need to now change this parent element to fixed, to a fixed width. Now where we are now going to add the fill is the inside element, which is now the child element. So we'll now go over here and change this hug to fill. So let's reduce the padding. I think the padding is, let's reduce the padding. Or let's change the padding to like 20. So you see that the text has stretched to fill the size of the container. You get? So now if we now type, you see. So it's always best to add fill inside of the container. You don't add fill to outside, because if you even try to add fill to the parent's container, you can't see fill. You can't see fill here. So it's best to always add the fill feature, or when you want to use the fill, you add it to the element you want to stretch to respond to the size of the parent container. I hope that helps. So let's go to the next thing. If you have any question, you can actually put your questions down below. So the next thing we're going to talk about is padding. So padding basically controls the spacing inside of a parent element. So after applying auto layout, if you want to adjust the padding, you can always adjust the padding here where you see your padding under the auto layout panel. So you can also change this to 20, and you can also change this to 16. So it depends. You can adjust it to different sizes. And if we want this button now to stretch, let's experiment the few stuff. If we want the element now to stretch, that's the child element to stretch as I stretch this container, what are we going to do? It's simple. Just apply fill to the button. Just go here and apply fill. You see, it has filled the button. So you shouldn't have any problem with fill after this video. So you see how we adjust it. You see, very simple and very, very easy. So the next thing we are going to talk about is horizontal and vertical layout. So what is horizontal and what is vertical layout? So let's say, for example, now let me delete this. Now, we're going to bring it in back. I just want to just go over it again because I've created this before. So now, let's say we have like multiple objects in a layout. So I'm going to add multiple layouts now. So let's delete this. We don't need this. So you have multiple layouts in a particular container. And this container, like this is, let's say this is a layout now. Let's say this is probably like a list. And you no longer want it to be to have this vertical layout. You want it to have like a horizontal layout. So you just come over here. That's after you must have added auto layout to the container. You just come over here and tweak the direction. So you can either change it to horizontal. So this is for a horizontal layout, or you change it to vertical or horizontal, vertical, horizontal. You can change it to different layouts. And let's say, for example, now, let's see, you can also edit the gap between those elements. So you see, it's already displaying a kind of like highlight that I'm hovering on that. So we can change it to 12. We can change it to, can even change it to 40, depending on how you want to evenly distribute them. So that's one sweet thing about auto layout. Auto layout help you to evenly distribute objects within a container. You don't have to manually use the on a regular day. How I would normally use this before I was able to learn how to use auto layout. When I have like two objects, what I'll just do is I will just use Alt. Then I'll use Alt and be trying to change it to 30, and once I stretch again, I will be. So you don't need to do this kinds of thing. You don't need to do this kind of thing. You can just quickly apply auto layout to it. Just select everything, then apply auto layout. And once you apply auto layout, you can just start working on. So you can just evenly distribute it. So you don't have to manually try to get the shapes. I saw one designer doing that one time. He said it was easy for him, but I was like, I just laughed because he didn't know how to use auto layout, which is like what can make your job very, very easy. You don't even have to think about the layout. You just start thinking of how to implement your actual design decisions. And here we can also change the direction for this. Can also change the direction for this, just like we did for the other one. So that's that for that concerning that. And now the next thing we're going to talk about is wrap. Now we've talked about horizontal and vertical layout. Let's say now we want to reduce this in such a way that as we keep reducing this, instead of it doing like this, we want this element to just wrap and keep wrapping till they get to a single file. So the best way to do that, you just change your horizontal layout to just wrap. And once you change it to wrap, then you can just, so you see, so, and you can use different alignment. So you can align it to the top. So you see, it aligns. So you can also do it this way. You can also make it come this way also. So once you keep stretching, you just stretch. So you can use different alignments. So you can either align to this. So that's another sweet thing about this alignment. You can align here, or you can even align to the center. You can align to the top. It's already. So this is not too wide. Let me increase it. So you can put it to the center. You can put it to down. So it depends. It depends on how you want to do it. So you can do it whatever way you want to. So that's the work of this alignment here. So finally, let's now experiment with a very complex. It's not really complex if you already know it, but with this, after this video, this shouldn't be complex for you. So now we're going to recreate this card, which I created for the purpose of this tutorial. So as you can see, this card, we want it to be responsive. So we want it to be responsive. We want it to be responsive. You see how it's responsive. So this is what we want to recreate now. So I'm going to take you on the journey to creating this. So first, we are going to bring out the element. I've already brought out the element, but first we're going to draw a frame. Let's quickly draw a frame. And let's name this card. Ooh. Yeah. So now let's click on this. Let's go back here and check the corner radius. So the corner radius I used here is 12. So we're going to change this to corner radius of 12. So which is okay now. So the next thing we're going to do is that I've already dropped the elements that we're going to use here. So these are the various elements that we're going to use. So I will just have to copy this. Then I'll just copy this and head over here. Select this and click on paste. So it has pasted. So we'll just move this to the left. We'll just move this to the left. And the next thing we're going to bring in this text and all. So if you look at here, there's no auto layer or anything to this. They are all individual elements. So let's drag everything, holding Alt. Let's drag everything and put inside here. Yes. So now there's something I want to experiment now. To achieve this, you need to understand what nested auto layer is. You understand? You need to understand what nested auto layer is. I see a lot of designers when they want to do this kind of stuff, they finish designing this and they apply auto layer to it. Let's try it. Let's see if it will work, sure. So once we click on this and apply auto layout, oh, damn! You see how scattered everything is? See, everything is scattered because we didn't nest them. You know, you need to be able to use nested auto layout to be able to arrange it and retain everything. So what are we going to do now? What we are going to do is very simple. So we'll start from top now. Let's go back. So I'll have to just remove all this. Let's delete this. We don't need it. Yeah. So we don't need this now. So the next thing we are going to do now, before you apply, when you are creating a card like this, before you apply the overall auto layout, you don't add everything and then add auto layout. You have to add auto layout to the small elements that are related to one another. That way you get like different nested auto layout before you now have like the final auto layout that will now merge everything. So how do I mean by that? See this button, we've already used auto layout to create it. So I'll just bring in the button so you don't have to actually add auto layout. But if you are creating this from scratch, obviously you will need to use auto layout to get this button working. Because if you see this button now, once we type, oh, it's not even responsive. Oh, you see? So let's quickly adjust that. Let's make it responsive quickly. So first we're going to make this responsive. So I'm going to change this button to hug. Yeah. And I think I like this. Let's change it to 36. All right. So now let's see. Oh, it's responsive now. So we have done the first one. The first thing is to make sure your button is responsive. So the next thing now, these elements are related. If you look at the way they are related. So let's drag all of them and bring into our work environment. So the first thing we are going to do, we are going to do the auto layout inside out. That means we are going to first of all do the auto layout for the ones inside before we now do the main one. Then we have the parent auto layout. What do I mean by that? So first of all, we are going to add auto layout to these two elements because they are very closely related, you know. So the first thing we are going to do is just add auto layout to this. And let's name this username plus date. So we are done with that. So the next thing now, which element is closely related again? The image of the user. So that's the next thing. Since if you already have a username and a date, the next thing is what? The user profile. Let's see who is behind the name and why we gave it the date. So the date probably is probably when he published this or something. So now, since we selected the user image, then we click on auto layout. So now we've actually grouped that together with auto layout. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to name it image plus user name plus, okay, I think that's just image plus username plus date because we have the date inside. So since we have done that, so the next thing now, what is closely related again? Now, the next thing is now the final one, which is the icon, which is now the return icon. don't know why it's there, but let's say you have something there or you have an icon there or something. So I don't know why the return icon is there. I don't know why I put it there, but I didn't put too much thought to that. So we have gotten that. So the next thing to now do is now to add auto layout to this. Oh no. All right. All right. So we've added auto layout to this again. And now we're going to name it image plus user name plus icon. So now you see now, this is now the parent auto layout. So we started off by doing the minor thing. Then first of all, we started off, if you see now, we nested a lot of auto layout just to achieve this. You see, first of all, we had to add these two elements together. Then we coupled it with like the image before we coupled it with before we now merged it with the icon. So that's the proper way to do auto layout. You start from the inside out, not out inside, because a lot of people do it backwards. So the best way to do auto layout is first of all, group the elements within before you now move out. You get, so that's that for that. So now the next thing we are now going to do is that let's align this. So this is okay now. So the next thing that we're now going to bring in is this header and the subtext. Let me drag it inside. All right. I held Alt. I held the Alt button on my keyboard to actually drag this in. So now, if you look at it, you see that this is the subtext and this is the header. So there are elements that are related to one another. So I'll just select both of them and apply auto layout to it. And then I'll name it header plus sub text. So now that we have all this now, okay, let's experiment it again. Let's try to add auto layout to the whole thing. One more time, I see how that works. So let's add auto layout. You see, it's still scattered even if we have arranged it and nested the auto layout. So the last thing we are going to do now, we are still going to group similar elements so that they don't get scattered when I add auto layout to it. So the last thing we are now going to do is now to add 3 of this. We'll now merge them together. So we are going to merge them together now and name it header plus user details plus button. And basically, let's change the name. So all these things make up the right content, the content on the right. So this is the content on the right, and the content on the left is what? Is the image. So what we are going to do now, let's add auto layout to this. Wow. You see, it's very easy. It didn't work because we were trying to add auto layout from top inward instead of doing it the other way. So now that we've done it this way, you see how everything just creeps inside. So that's the best way to create auto layout. You need to start from inside before applying the final one. So now we now really need to now work on this now. So the next thing we're going to do, first I'm going to remove, I don't want any space in here. I don't want any space in here because I didn't add any space in there. So you see there's no spacing within that. So the first thing I'm going to do is, remember we talked about gap. So we are going to edit the gap here. So we're going to edit the gap. So if you want to check the layout now, you see the layout works now. So we can change the layout. But this is not what we want. We want, when we are dragging this, it should wrap. You get? We want it to wrap, which is not happening now. We don't want to be able to adjust it with the layout manually here. You know, that this one didn't adjust that way. So now the next thing we're going to do now, we're going to add padding to this right stuff because I want padding to be there. Okay, there's one last auto layer that we need to actually do. Let's put this together. Let me add auto layer to it because I want them to be closer than the distance between. So I want the distance between this should be lesser than the distance between this content and the button. So I'm going to name it header plus user details. So now the overall container, now I'm going to add like a gap of 40. I think 40 is too much. Let's do like 24. And within here, let's add like 12. So now I'm going to add like a padding around this because there's no padding currently. You see, there's zero padding to the right content, to the main, that's the right content. That's this auto layout. Other auto layout has been, so this is the one nesting this other auto layout, which is the header plus the user details and the button. So we are applying it to the overall auto layout, holding everything. So we are going to add padding to it. So we're going to add 20 here, 20 right to the right, 20. So you see now, that's added spacing here, spacing here, spacing here for us. So now the next thing we're going to do now is to add fill to this image. So once we add fill to this image now, you see, so the image adjusts. So the image is already responding, which is very, very amazing. So now we've talked about nested auto layout now. So you understand what nested auto layout is and how to properly build a component with auto layout. So you start from the inside out, not the outside, and then start moving inward. So the next thing we are going to do now, I want to make this responsive now. I want to make it responsive. I want to make it grow. So we added this so that we could be able to make this one stretch to the space inside the parent. So the more space we add, the more the image fills it. So you see, that's one sweet thing about the fill container. So the next thing, we're going to add fill to this too. But first, let's add like padding to this to like 4 rounder. 4 and 4. And then let's change this to fill content. So we've changed it to fill content. Let's try stretching it again. So it's filling now. It's filling the whole thing, but the only issue now is that it's still getting scattered, which is not what we want. And as you can see, this button is not stretching with the container. It just remains fixed. So we need to work on that. And this also just remains fixed. We need to work on that. So I think this is perfect because they are stretching with the container, which is good. You know, we still maintain the padding of 20 we added, which is cool also. So let's quickly work on those ones. So the first thing we're going to do is to change this to fill. It's on hub, that's why it's not. So now we want it to stretch. So we are going to add fill to this and also add fill to this. Yeah. So don't apply fill to your icon, so it's not advisable. And then we add fill to this. So you don't apply fill to icons and all that. So, wow, this is making sense. But the only issue that we have now is that it's not wrapping. You get, like, everything is just stretching and they are getting smaller. So for us to now make it wrap effectively, even if we add wraps, if you see wrap won't work. You see, wrap is not working. So why wrap is not working is because we've not set the minimum and maximum width. Let me take that again. Why wrap is not effective is because we didn't set a minimum and maximum width. So once we set a minimum and maximum width, the wrap can easily know when we want it to wrap. So to do that is, first we're going to add wrap to this. We are going to add a minimum width. So we want it to be that anytime we stretch, when it gets to a particular place where it starts, so you see the image now is now the card doesn't look okay again. I think where it breaks, where it starts to break, you see, this is looking okay now. So it has broken now, you see. So now there's now a space which we were not the one that, like, we don't want that kind of space on our card when we are stretching, you get. So this is one of the places that we need to add before it breaks like this. We need to add minimum width. So this is the place we need to add minimum width to. So for this now, what we are now going to do, we are going to select this and then come down here. There's already fill there, but once you hover on it, it changes to a drop down button. So now we'll change to add minimum width. So the minimum width now will be this particular width that we are seeing here. Because after this now, is when you try to reduce it, it breaks. So then we're also going to add that same minimum width to this. Oh no, let's not add it to... No, I think we should add it here. Let's add it here too. So let's add the same minimum width here. Let's make it 257. So let's try it out. Wow. So you see it now. It can wrap now because we've set the minimum width. So it's already on wrap. But if we remove it from wrap, we'll just change it to a right alignment. Let's see if it will still wrap. So it doesn't wrap. It just responds to the minimum width. So it stops stretching because we've added a minimum width to it. But when you add wrap, so it easily wraps. Wow, we've done a great job. So the next thing is that we are going to add a maximum width so that it doesn't pass this. We're going to add a minimum width rather. Sorry, not maximum width. A minimum width that once it gets here, it shouldn't reduce further. Shouldn't reduce further. What am I typing? Let's change it back to fixed and change to minimum width. So we'll just change this to 256. Yes, that's the minimum width. So once we stretch now, you see. Once we stretch now. So this is what we want. Now that we have done this now, the next thing is to do now, we want to apply it to a layout. We want to now add a layout. Let's say we want to have like multiple cards. Let me push this. We don't need this again. So okay, we might need it for the images, but let's say now we'll bring in a desktop frame. Let's bring in a desktop frame. And let's change this to D9 so that we'll be able to see, because the card is already white, so we need to look for an image. So let's bring this our card inside. And let's bring in this other card inside too. So now let's apply auto layout to the desktop frame. So you see, but let me change the vertical padding to 80 and the vertical padding to 80. And now let's change both of them to hug content. Yep. So this is what I want. So now you see, once we now reduce this, oh, it's not adjusting. So what we are now going to do is that we are going to change this back to hug, and then we're going to change it to wrap. So you see, but you notice something, it doesn't wrap like the way we want it to wrap. So for it to wrap like that way, we need to change this to fill. Change this to fill. Change this to fill, and change this to fill. So let's try that again. Wow, you see, it's wrapping easily and effortlessly. So let's introduce the gap. The gap is too much. I think 40 should be okay. The text inside are kind of like different. Let's just remove this and just use this instead. I use different sizes, so we don't have that much time to start editing it one after the other. So if you can follow through with this tutorial, you can easily do that. So what we're just going to do, we are going to duplicate this and duplicate this. You see, once we keep duplicating, let's just carry it upward a bit. I don't want this tutorial to take too much time. So what you're just going to do is just reduce. You see how it stretch easily. See how it stretch. All right, that's it. So thank you for staying with me. Thank you for staying this long. So I appreciate, and make sure to like, comment, and share this video. Share it with your friends that might want to learn how to create responsive components with auto layout. You see that we now have different variants of this same card. Let me bring it out. We now have like different variants. We have this one, and once we duplicate it, we can now have another variant of this same component. So that's one good thing about creating your layout this way. I hope this is helpful. See you in the next video.